Hi, I'm Thomas from Festfloor. Today, we'll show you how to install the Festfloor Life system floor step by step. As this is a long video, grab a cup of tea or coffee, settle in, and enjoy the film. Before starting the application, I grind and vacuum the entire floor, whether it is a cement screed or an anhydrite screed. You may encounter cement or anhydrite screeds. In this case, I recommend grinding with cup wheels. In the case of cement screeds, grinding with coarse grit sandpaper is sufficient. This will improve the adhesion of the microcement to the substrate. After sanding, I prime the entire surface with FestGrunt. There's nothing tricky about this step. Just spread it over the whole floor with a roller. Sometimes, when the floor is more absorbent, for example with an anhydrite screed, I prime it twice. This is the moment when I look for any cracks and other defects. And this is the best time to repair them. How I stitch cracks is shown in another video on our channel. The primer dries quickly, in about 2 to 3 hours. I can move on to embedding the mesh. Festfloor offers two types of mesh, the regular one and the super thin one. Which one you choose depends on you and your preferences. For this project, I used the standard mesh. Before sticking down the mesh, I prepare it first. I cut it so that it fits the room and all the nooks and crannies. It's nice to do this with two people, but you can also handle it on your own without any problem. I stick the mesh down using FestLiquid polymer. I simply spread it with a roller over the mesh on the floor. Fast liquid bonds the mesh firmly to the substrate. This makes it easier to spread the base over the surface later. You can also embed the mesh directly into fresh base without pre-bonding. This method works well for me, as I've shown here, and many contractors do likewise. They embed the mesh like this before moving on to the next stages. The polymer dries very quickly, and after just an hour or two I can apply the Festfloor base. Usually, for the first layer, I start by applying the XL base with a coarser aggregate of about 0.8 mm. Why do I do this? It creates a very strong base for me and also covers the mesh very well. First, I pour in the polymer FestLiquid, and then I add the Fest powder. If I did it the other way round, and added the polymer to the powder at the bottom, there would be unmixed particles of powder left during mixing. To prepare the mixture for 5 liters of polymer, I add 15 kilograms of dry powder. But you can add more or less polymer to get the consistency you like. I mix everything with a basket mixer. It works best for me to achieve a uniform consistency. After mixing, I pour the base directly onto the floor and spread it with the base to cover the mesh. Try to do this as evenly as possible to avoid creating unnecessary bumps. The XL base dries fairly quickly. After 2 hours, when it's ready, I start sanding to remove any bumps. I use cup grinding discs for this. It's best to do this on the same day. If you leave it until the next day, it might take you a bit more time. After vacuuming, I can prepare the L base. I do it exactly the same way as with the XL base. Base L has finer aggregate, about 0.5 mm, and covers the mesh precisely. Again, I spread everything over the entire surface and sand it exactly the same way as the previous L layer. The better you prepare the base and the more effort you put into it, then it will be for you later easier to apply the next layers of microcement. After the L base has dried, I sand it with pads of 50 grit. As you can see, we spend quite a lot of time on this and don't skip any spots. It often happens that beginners don't reach the edges, which later causes unnecessary unevenness from the excess material. Be careful about that. After sanding, we vacuum again. I personally find it much better to actually go ahead and add extra pigment to this initial foundational base layer of the material. I make sure to use exactly the same type of pigment that I used in all of the subsequent layers of microcement that will be applied later on. It's worth adding it because sometimes, if I get distracted while sanding the finishing layers of microcement and sand through them, I have underneath it. I'm adding pigment to the polymer. I shake it thoroughly and then mix it with the dry powder, exactly as I did earlier with the XL base. Again, I spread everything over the entire surface and sand it exactly the same way as the previous layer. There are always questions coming up about what to use to sand microcement. Should it be sandpaper, pads, by hand or with heavier planetary machines? That's really a topic for a separate episode. I started out with a scrubber and paper myself, but over time, I've seen how much the quality of the equipment affects the final result, so I began investing in new machines. Half the video is over, and we've only just prepared the substrate. This really shows how long the preparation work takes before applying the decorative and finishing layers. The temptation to skip these steps is strong, especially for those just starting out. However, from my own experience and that of my colleagues, the better we prepare everything, the better the result will be. And the floor's lifespan will extend as well. Right, let's get started on the decorative layers. For this project, I used the Festfloor Life system, which, like the base, is two-component. I need to add the pigment to the polymer. For this project, we had a custom NCS color, prepared especially for this order. After mixing the pigment with the polymer, I pour it into an empty bucket and add the dry compound Fest powder. I add it gradually while mixing. I can make the consistency just how I like it by adding a bit more or less polymer. Personally, on a well-prepared substrate, I find it easier to work when the mixture is more fluid. This way, I can spread it more quickly in a thin layer, just like the base. I start applying it from the farthest point in the room, usually from the windows, and move towards the exit. As you can see, we usually have a little roll of material that we systematically move towards ourselves. The final stroke I make is from myself towards the material to break the line that was created when using the trowel. After applying and letting it dry, I wait about 2 hours again and then get on with sanding. These are already the finishing layers, so I sand them with pads of 100 grit. I also make sure to do the sanding on the same day. And again after sanding, I vacuum the entire floor. The whole thing already looks really good. Now I apply the final layer of microcement exactly the same way as before. This is the moment when you need to be the most precise. At this point, you give the floor its final look and character. As you can see, I always have two people applying the material, and that's very useful because we have one person constantly adding more material, and in wider areas we can work together evenly to spread it over the whole surface. This is the final sanding of the microcement. Again, I'm using pads with a grit of 100. I start with the areas near the wall, using orbital sanders, and then, just like before, I go over it with a larger machine. And again vacuuming. You need to have the floor perfectly cleaned of dust after sanding before apply sealer. I thoroughly vacuum all the nooks, edges, and the entire surface. At this point, the floor is easy to dirty, so avoid walking on it with shoes. Be especially careful with cables and vacuum hoses, which can easily scratch the surface. Time for a sealer. For sealing, I use PU Fest Turbo, a 2-component solvent-based polyurethane sealer. Due to its fairly strong fumes, you need gas filter masks for application, and I recommend it primarily to experienced users. Before opening the sealers, shake the cans thoroughly. After opening the component A, also mix the sealer by hand. To component A, add component B in a 2:1 ratio. Mix the whole thing for about 3 minutes. After mixing, you have roughly 45 minutes to apply the sealer on the floor. Coveralls protect our clothes and prevent dust or hair falling from us onto the floor, which could easily get embedded in the sealer layer. Also make sure the room is well lit. It's best to seal during the day. Then you can see everything clearly and won't miss any spots during sealing. I spread the sealer evenly across the entire surface. I make sure the roller is always soaked with sealer. You can seal by pouring the sealer directly onto the floor or applying it from a tray. Don't seal with a dry roller, as it may leave marks on the floor. The sealer sets in about 24 to 48 hours. After this time, you can safely walk on it. This is the time when I can walk across the floor and check if any hairs or dirt have got into the sealer. If I spot anything, I can remove it with 150 grit sandpaper. Once again, I vacuum the surface. Now I can get on with applying the second layer of PU Fest Turbo Sealer. I do this exactly the same way as the first time. The sealer will be dry after about 24 to 48 hours from application. The Festfloor Life Microcement floor is now ready. If anything was unclear, because this is a multi-stage process, the comments section is for you. Thanks for today, and see you in the next videos. Cheers!